No, I don't trust the cloud.
Got it. All right, perfect. Yay! Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to Tea Time Astrology. I guess that's the title of our stuff now, but Tea Time Astrology Transits with myself, Miss Kelly Glazebrook, and Miss Mo Olufemi. We are here, 3 astrologers, looking at the astrology of the royal family and all of their shenanigans. Now, if you've joined us last time, you know that we enjoy doing this because they have offered up their charts willingly to us with their birth times. So as astrologers, we appreciate the case studies as a way to learn, and a little bit of gossip never hurts either. So today's topic is a little bit touchy. It's a little bit sensitive. So we want you to know that we'll be talking about sex and abuse, as that seems to be something that is very prevalent in the news lately on both sides of the pond. And if that is something that you have experienced or have seen firsthand or anything of that nature, and you find that to be triggering, this may not be the presentation for you. So please use the numbers that we have on the screen if you need to talk to anyone. Kelly, if you want to explain what we have on the screen, just for anyone.
Yeah, so we do have the numbers for RAINN in the United States. You can contact them over at their website, and they actually have texting services too on the website, or the 800 number. We also wanted to give the links because we know that there are people all over. We did find usually the English speaking country ones. So we do have the link for Canada there and the number for Canada, and that links to there. And then we also have the Survivors Trust in the UK and their number as well. And you can, I believe, text or call that number in the UK if you would like to discuss any of these topics. And yeah, if you do find these difficult, I would suggest skipping this particular episode and we'll be back. But it's very difficult to ignore like what's happening right now, which is a lot of discussions surrounding human trafficking and also sexual assault and possible violence. So yeah, take care of yourself first of all, and join us again if you want to skip that.
Excellent. So moving on, we are going to be discussing some of the news around Prince Andrew, who is currently caught up in a little bit of a scandal based upon his relationships with Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell. There's also Peter Nygaard. I'm not sure if there's anybody else, but there have been a couple of compromising situations that Andrew refuses to talk about after his disastrous interview, I think at the beginning of 2020.
2020. Yeah.
So where he revealed that he couldn't sweat
while sweating.
and that he needed to fly over to New York to break up with Mr. Epstein after he had been convicted of, I believe, was it sex trafficking or something to that effect? He had been convicted and found to be guilty. And Andrew said, well, I need to fly to New York to break up with him, and then proceeded to spend a couple of days hanging out together.
Yeah.
And couldn't find any other accommodations in New York City at the time to do so. So these stories that he tells seem a little bit thin. And unfortunately, the story seems to the family seems to have somewhat of a history with getting involved with people who have a proclivity towards abusing young children and adults in a sexual manner.
Yeah, and the reason why it's coming up again is because one of the victims did file a civil suit against Prince Andrew in New York State on Monday, August 9th. So now all of this is like getting revisited and kind of relitigated literally in like the court of public opinion and in the real court. So it's definitely, reason why we're talking about it is because it's coming up again.
Exactly. Now, a bigger picture I don't think we've really spoken about is that the United States right now is going through a Pluto return. Right. And Pluto as a planet, I don't know if we've discussed this before, but Pluto in mythology is usually associated with Hades, the lord of the underworld, right? And there's mythology around Hades kidnapping Persephone from Earth into the underworld so that she could be his wife. Now, this was not a willing situation. Persephone was very happy with her mother Ceres on Earth, providing spring and summer. But when she was kidnapped, this threw the Earth into winter, right? Because Ceres is like, I'm not growing any more food until my daughter gets back here. So an agreement was struck in which Persephone was allowed to come back to the Earth for spring and summer, and then spend fall and winter in the underworld with her husband. Now, it's likely we're going to see some Plutonic connections in our astrology, but I'm sure there'll be other things too. But I believe that some of this is coming up because the US having its Pluto return when it broke away from the UK is also bringing in the UK historically, because, you know, that's our mother country originally. Don't get upset, Americans. This is just history. You know, we broke away. I get it. But there is a link there. And it seems like this link is coming up a lot around some of these sex trafficking stories that we hear going on lately. So think about Pluto in terms of power, manipulation, and how we wield it. And in the US, this chart, I believe we have Pluto in the second house that has to do with our values, our money, and what we deem to be important. And so maybe we have some stuff that we have to kind of hash out and figure out before we can heal it as a country, if we heal it all. Now, I don't know if that's the same in the UK, but it's very interesting that this is happening now.
Mm-hmm. It's also interesting when you're talking about cycles to note that this lawsuit was filed almost to the day, 2 years after the day that Epstein was found dead. So kind of like be revisiting a lot of, you know, themes over and over again, that kind of like when you start noticing them, you're like, oh, that's creepy, the way that keeps happening. So yeah, that's definitely cycles, repeating themes, and all those kinds of things are definitely echoed in all of these charts and timing and dates and stuff like that as well.
So for now, we're going to focus on members of the family. We did discuss Virginia briefly, but out of respect for her, we may not look at her chart just as yet. We haven't decided if that's something that we want to do yet, because she is a victim.
She's a victim. She's not necessarily a public figure, nor wanted to be necessarily. So, but yeah, if you want to look at Prince Andrew's natal chart, we do have that here.
Okay, so where to begin with the Prince Andrew? So, I mean, for me, the first thing I notice is that Randy, Jupiter, and Sag in the 5th house.
Oh yeah. Well, I just see like a person with such huge appetites, you know, especially with like the Mars and Venus in Capricorn and all that. It's just like carnal, lusty kind of vibes that you get from this chart.
Yeah, especially with that exalted Mars and Capricorn in its joy, like, you know, when it wants, it gets it, right? Like, and I think there's an element of like, you know, wielding power in a way, because like that conjunction in the 3rd decan of Capricorn very much has connotations of like, you know, having the authority to like move money around, and like who gets to decide how resources are used and who gets to assign value to things. And so there's this I don't want to say exploitative, but, you know, just because, you know, it is like an out of sect Mars in that decan of Capricorn near its exaltation degree. Actually, there's this like maybe exploitation of his like family lineage, and I guess his reputation, just because his midheaven is ruled by that Mars as well, like that comes into play.
And Mo, for the people who are listening, what is the exaltation degree for Mars in Capricorn?
The exaltation degree of Mars is about 28 degrees, and so it's like literally right there.
I mean, I would give it to Mars. I mean, I know it's not exact, but
it's
there. Applying.
It's there.
It's applying.
And Venus is there as well. It's interesting because we're going to see, if we look at other charts of people who have been caught up in the story, we're going to see this Venus-Mars signature quite a bit. Kelly, if you could point that out to people, because it's kind of this thing around, you know, Mars is action and Venus is desire. So acting on my desires and having the desire to act, right? So that's not to say that everyone who has this signature behaves the same way, but you can see that there is a desire to enjoy things and act on those lusts quite easily.
Like it's also interesting to think about Andrew's chart, because like just coming back to his Jupiter and Sagittarius, like it's literally at the bendings of the nodes. Like it's in that square point with the nodes. So it's almost like, you know, he's getting sucked into these situations that like might be created by like the imbalance between like his appetites, which I feel like are captured by having both Pluto and the North Node in the second whole sign house, but also like, you know, having that, you know, South Node is just like, you know, willing to give to have like these appetites. Like, and I'm thinking about the fact that his North Node ruler is in the eighth, like co-present with that South Node. And it's almost like, you know, willing to risk his like, you know, financial comfort and whatnot to like benefit from the shared pooled resources of others. And I feel like that's kind of his downfall.
Yeah, but you can see also why he got involved in like handling other people's money or like being a go-between, you know, for other people's money because of that eighth house action. And so like that was his entire job.
I would also offer, Mo, like you said about that Jupiter being in the bendings. So when a planet is in the bendings or in between the nodes, as you see here, that planet has a lot of power when it comes to deciding the fate of the person, which way are they going. So for him, Jupiter in Sagittarius in the fifth house, a lot of his fate is tied up in how he acts on his fifth house things, how he expands in the fifth house, right? Fifth house has to do with sex, entertainment, pleasure, any kind of, you know, creative ability as well. Can also be in that fifth house. Children too. So we're seeing this thing like how you are with your excesses, how you manage your excesses with sex is definitely involved in his faith, right? Or in his fate. It's also tied to that second house, eighth house. So money is one part of it. And then the eighth house and the fifth house have connotations around sex as well. So it's interesting that the South Node is ruled by that Jupiter. So this might have been a past life situation for him, right? You're coming in with a lot of appetite for the good life and having the ability to act on it. So since he did not manage that energy well, we're seeing how his fate is playing out, where he may end up in a lot of trouble because of that Jupiter in Sagittarius, not knowing how to pump the brakes. I think
too, yeah, you see that with the Pluto signature as well, opposite sun.
Oh my God, yeah. Like I can't believe like we've missed that, especially because like the sun rules him as a person, like that eighth house sun in Pisces. Like, you know, I feel like people sleep on like Pisces as a jovial sign, you know, Jupiter rules sign. But I think because it's like nocturnal Jupiter, it's like there's this indulgent kind of like dreamy, indulgent wanderer type energy. And I think that that's very much Andrew's like main problem is that, you know, like he likes the good life, you know, he likes the glamour, he likes the you know, the image. And I wanted to say that like, you know, with all his Pisces placements answering to that third decan Jupiter in Sagittarius, like there's this element of that last decan where it's like, you know, it does have like, you know, again, king killer energy, you know, like the end of monarchs. So, you know, Andrew brings down the monarchy like with his like philandering
excesses.
Excesses. Do not be surprised. Like, I mean, it's not looking good for them right now. It's not good. It's not good out here. Yeah.
This is also an example of not all planets in domicile or exaltation are your friends, right? Since this Jupiter in Sagittarius answers to nobody else because he's in the sign of rulership, it's like, who's going to check me, boo? Nobody.
No one.
No one's going to check me. You can't tell me no. I am Jupiter in Sagittarius in the fifth house. I am going to enjoy myself no matter what. And I will not hit the brakes because it is Sagittarius, right? The same thing with that that Mars in Capricorn. You know, how do you tell a Mars in Capricorn to stop doing what they've been doing when they're on the mountain climbing?
You don't.
You don't.
You literally just don't.
And also you see. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say, like, because he has that late decan, Jupiter in Sagittarius, like by progression, like technically it is in Capricorn. So, like, you know, while things started off nice, like, dude got a little too comfortable. All of to say, like, yeah.
Okay.
I always notice too is that Uranus on the ascendant. just
Holy
like
crap,
a
I
wild
always
card, like a wild card kind of, feeling to this chart a lot of like, what's your deal? Like, yeah. And he just switches it up when he needs to, or, he gets caught up in things that are bigger than himself and is like, wait, what happened? How did I get here? And doesn't know how to like exit like at all. Just like you said, I think, Janelle, like all gas, no brakes. Like this chart, there's no breaks in this chart at all. There's none.
It's very interesting that I'm noticing now, right? So he is a sun opposite Pluto person, like we said. So here it's Hades again. It's opposite one of the lights. So there is an element of him trying to wrangle or deal with this power struggle that he has within himself, most likely. And then also that Neptune in the fourth house seems to be, is that trine, applying trine to the sun?
Sun, yeah.
Yeah, the sun's applying, yep.
Yeah, so his family is giving him a ton of cover. Right? It's like blasting fog over him. No, don't look over here, look over there, kind of thing. So
like Wizard of Oz vibes, like don't pay any attention to the man behind the curtain.
And then also there could be some more, his IC being in Libra in the third house, being ruled by that Venus conjunct Mars. So again, I do think there is some family involvement in some of this mess, as we are seeing.
Yes.
So whether that means that other family members have been tagging along and enjoying themselves with him, or they are doing their best to maintain the structures around him that allow him to do these things.
And you can't ignore the fallen moon either. In the fourth.
Oh yes, that fallen moon.
And that fallen moon is at the exact degree as his mother's Saturn, I believe. So yeah.
Yes, which we will get to.
Yeah. So it's always, you're always like, oh, it's almost like a foreshadowing, like the downfall of, the queen sort of feeling, those kind of vibes.
So
a little bit.
That moon is the ruler of his 12th house of, things you don't necessarily see, right? Secrets. So there is a link. There's a link between his secrets and the family as well. So family secrets might be the thing that bring down the House of Windsor, if this goes how it's continue to go.
And you
we'll see.
You can't ignore too the Uranus transit in his 10th.
Interestingly enough, I was checking his progressions, and now he is a Taurus sun.
Is Jupiter retrograde, by the way? Has it gone retrograde?
Jupiter.
Progressed Jupiter. Is it retrograde yet?
I'm not sure. I haven't looked.
Okay. Because like if that hasn't happened, like it's going to happen. Like,
whoops. Bad timing, Andrew. You should have gotten an astrologer. No, don't do that. No astrologer.
No.
If you're gonna be doing bad things.
None.
None.
Bad.
No.
Okay, so I think that's pretty good. Anything else you want to add about Mr. Andrew?
No.
Mountain Batten.
We good?
Yeah. We good. So traditionally, the royal family mantra has been never complain, never explain, but that doesn't seem to be the case right now.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to lawsuits and depositions and judgments, because Andrew has been asked very politely by the US to come visit the FBI and talk about some things. He's like, maybe not, I won't do that.
Yeah.
So far, he has not.
Yeah, that doesn't really work when you're dealing with the law. They don't really care. So he's going to have to decide if he's going to answer the lawsuit or not, because if he doesn't answer, they can get a judgment against him, and so then he's convicted in a court of law as being, a predator and all that. Or he answers it and then he has to do like a lawsuit and he has to do depositions and all that fun stuff, which I don't think he wants to do. So he's between a rock and a hard place on that one for sure. So not fun, but you can see the queen giving him support. So this was taken
protection
last week, I believe.
Was it last week or
last week when he's on his way to Balmoral, I believe, right?
Oh, was this picture taken last week, you're saying?
I believe so. Maybe
Okay.
not.
I thought it was last year.
Last year. Okay.
Last year.
This was this was like when this was like the day that like something happened with Epstein, and like
yeah, I think it's when he died.
yeah, no, you're right, like when
Okay.
he died, like this is her like going, and it's just like, girl, this is bad optics, what are you
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah.
It's really bad.
Which leads into our next like thing, which is why. And I need to learn to erase these little blue
Our
things.
little arrows.
Where,
Our little arrows.
like, it's not coming up.
It's okay. We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. May need to.
So the next chart we're probably going to look at is going to be Miss Queen Elizabeth, since I think she has said openly, or it's open knowledge, that Andrew is her favorite child. Now, my theory is that Andrew is one of the first child that she was actually able to mother completely, because when when Charles and Anne were young, she was traveling all over the world and doing her queen duties because her father had passed away suddenly. But by the time Andrew rolled around, because I think Andrew is 12 years younger than Charles?
12 years younger than Charles, yeah.
So they share a Jupiter. By the time Andrew came around, she had more time and space to mother, and maybe a little bit of spoiling might have happened, possibly.
I think she said before too that like she had the first two children for like the state, and the next two children were like her choice kind of deal. And it's like, oh, okay.
Okay. So let's take a look.
And also, yeah, just to mention that she has been paying for his lawsuits and protecting him sort of in that fashion. Like Andrew right now is at Balmoral. So he's like away from anyone trying to depose him or anything because she's protecting him. So that's interesting. But yeah.
Okay, like the queen. Okay. Yeah, like so as we talked about earlier, like her moon, Andrew's moon is right on her like Saturn midheaven conjunction. So again, like I feel like the secrets he has, the secrets he has are not like, no, this is good.
No, it's not good. It's moving back. There we go.
Okay, this is great.
For people who are listening, we're finishing up a Mercury-Mars conjunction in Virgo, which seems to be worse than a regular Mercury retrograde because things are just
100%.
acting crazy.
Nah, wait till the next like Mercury-Mars conjunction in Libra. That's
no. Okay, so looking at Queen Elizabeth's chart, what do we got going on here? Well, the one thing I noticed that she is a Taurus sun in the whole sign 5th house. So I do think there is somewhat of an identification with her children, right? She does feel strongly about them. And I guess they're somewhat blessed because that ruler of her 5th house is Venus in Pisces in the 3rd house. Is that Venus in decent condition? She gets a trine from Pluto and a very loose trine from Saturn. So there's definitely a story around her children being involved, very involved somehow, right? They do royal work, they work with her, they do business, right?
Yeah, like also like I think because like technically that Venus rules the 10th whole sign house as well, like using her children as part of her brand has been a huge success for the monarchy, like and its longevity. So like there's that to be said. Yeah.
I always forget that she's an 8th house moon. I don't know why it doesn't stick in my head. There's so much 8th house energy from a lot of these charts that's very interesting to me about, other people's resources, but also things that are hidden, that kind of deal. So it's just always interesting to see those repeating patterns over and over again.
So what we consider the more hidden houses, house 4, house 8, and house 12.
With Neptune there again, didn't we just look at Andrew when he had Neptune?
He had Neptune
with the moon in the 4th? Like,
yeah, that moon Neptune, they share that.
They
have the reverse. So she has Mercury in the 4th, right? And he has it in the 8th. And then he has the moon in the 4th, and she has it in the Yeah. So there's some.
Wow, I always forget she's an Aries Mercury. I always forget. Like,
Which is
really
odd
do.
because she doesn't seem that way, but maybe that's part of the show that she puts on. Because
That's the
I
show.
feel like her voice would be a little bit more forceful and what have you.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Is there any Neptune involved? Well, it's a loose trine, but
yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I do have a comment about her Mars Jupiter conjunction in the second house. Like, you know, it does rule like the fourth whole sign house, which has to do with family. Like, so like whenever you see like the floating midheaven, and I see in both like whole sign and equal house systems, like you can kind of say that like the whole sign or equal 10th and 4th have to do with like your like experience of like what you actually do and like what your family life looks like. But then like, you know, the midheaven I see can be like the personal experience or personal expectations around that. And so like, you know, one way you can see that is like, you know, with Mars in that third decan of Aquarius, like also managing like her reputation is like, you know what, this family might be somewhat dysfunctional, right?
Somewhat.
And
You're being kind.
somewhat dysfunctional, and you know what, there's like a lot of burdens you have to shoulder there, just especially with that Mars Saturn mutual reception going on. So I mean, there's this element of like the way she carries herself in like social circles that like allows maybe some distancing from, or like, you know, maybe an understanding of like how the family functions, even if it's not like the most optimal. But like maybe like, you know, her finding her joy like with, you know, protecting her children. So that's where that exalted Venus comes through.
She's
And
like,
you
maybe I
know,
can't do much, but I'm going to protect these kids.
yeah,
kind of deal.
and you know, it's ironic how, you know, like our perception of like, you know, her family is really probably how she feels about her like actual like what she actually does, right? It's like, okay, like all these other people have a say in like how I manage my brand and like my reputation, just because of that Jupiter conjunction as well. Like, and I think that's all squaring like Andrew's moon. So like I think like the Jupiter Mars, like Saturn stuff is like really speaking to whatever's going on with Andrew right now. Like,
well, this is all, those planets are also involved in a T-square as well, right? So Jupiter, Mars, square to Saturn, Saturn square to Neptune, Neptune opposite that as well. From the 8th house, from the 11th house, and from, you know, so there's definitely something going on. And traditionally with T-squares, we like to ground that energy down into the empty leg. So think of it as like a chair or a table that's missing a leg and it's just kind of wobbling. So in this case, we would shoot this energy from the apex of Saturn down into that 5th house. So there's definitely a story where the complications of her brand again have to do with her children, and then also with the pleasures that they're getting up to, which again, the sex, right? So it's definitely something is going on here.
Yeah.
Do you see anything particularly like Plutonic, like that we want to talk about before we?
Well, Pluto trying to that Venus and Saturn.
I was thinking about that. Yeah.
And again, that involves her children through Venus, and then Saturn's in control of her money and herself. So, you know, her image and her income. So now we're having a lot of issues around money laundering as well. And all of this stuff is coming out into the open after her 8th house perfection year for her coronation chart. Now she's in the 9th house perfection year for that coronation chart. And a lot of news is coming out about the stuff that was going on in the 8th house year.
You know what's interesting as well, now that you mention it, because I think she just started like a 12th house perfection like for herself. So that Jupiter in the 2nd is really being highlighted. And
Saturn's gonna go sit on it too.
Literally, and like, you know, she's wrapping up her like millionth Jupiter return at this point. Jupiter actually stations direct on her Jupiter opposite, like all this stuff. So like I really feel like, you know, between like what's going on with Andrew and like, you know, like the money dealings, because I feel like, you know, like in having to deal with like her kid going through this shit, like, and her like making the choice to defend him and use like resources, partially her own, partially like public resources to like defend him. There's going to be a lot of scrutiny drawn when it comes to like how she's been using her money and like what she's been using it for. And like, I don't know, there's just going to be a lot of like
second house
attention.
stuff.
Yeah, and questions drawn to that, like, you know, where are you getting this money, and like why are you using it to defend this like this problematic stuff? And I think it's going to bring up like really challenging questions for like the monarchy and how it can survive, that, you know, she's going to have to answer like when she enters her first house perfection, you know, which is activating that Saturn on the midheaven. Like, you know, what like in that last decan of Scorpio, it's like, you know, what are you building on the ashes of something else, right? And you know, because like the midheaven comes to the back to the sign that has its like the most challenging planet, which is ruled by her and her money, like there's going to be a lot of questions to answer about her legacy and like how she's using that. So,
and especially as Uranus goes over that, I see those last few ones, like I forget how much longer it's in Taurus.
It gets close in 2022, 2023.
Yeah,
like, it's coming.
Something like that. Yeah. And it's just
Yeah.
like every time I see that, I'm like, oh, you got changes coming, girl. Like it's gonna shake up your foundations, and everything you thought about like that was firm is on its way to being shook to the core.
I mean, it's also very interesting that she has Aquarius on that second house cusp, because it's really talking about how she makes her money. It is collective money, right? It is her country's money. The people's money are paying in, and the Neptune being opposite to and square to the ruler of the second is just like, but nobody knows where the money is. Nobody knows how much money they have. Nobody knows where it's going. Nobody knows how many accounts they have. Like, this is wild. So I think these questions are really going to start coming to the forefront for her,
especially since they got caught with like a lot of offshore accounts. So like all the like British and, you know, UK citizens paying into a pool of money for them, and the money doesn't even stay on their island. Like,
yeah, especially in the middle of Brexit and, you know, it's very austere Tory government right now too. It's not going to go over too well. So
especially if they end up paying settlements out of public funds, I don't think that'll get handled well.
Which for like various reasons I feel like is going to happen, to be honest.
Well, that Jupiter of hers, her Jupiter gets hit by Saturn starting next spring, I believe, in April. And then her natal Saturn gets to square from Saturn in Aquarius by spring, May or so, and it's going to go retrograde as well. So this is probably going to be a larger story starting from next year, spring, summertime.
For sure. Yeah, I can see that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, like I remember there's like a transit period, like it's like, you know, the end of March, early April's really rough, and that's around the time of her solar return actually. And well, like it's like leading up to her solar return, but like I know that there's like a Saturn Mars conjunction that happens right on her Jupiter. You know, right before she enters that Saturn year. And it's just, I don't know, it's just feeling like needing to settle. And, you know, Venus does like go over that Jupiter first and conjoins Saturn before Mars does. You know, it's interesting that, you know, that's what her Mars return is like. It's, yeah, like, I don't know, it's not looking good in terms of like, you know, having to settle and like pay settlements for your kid being out of pocket, basically. It's not looking good.
All right, who's next?
Yeah, let me erase. Erase. There we go. There, I'm learning my lesson on how to do it.
Awesome.
We're tech savvy over here. Sort of, kind of, not really.
Not really at all.
We're learning as we go.
I know. And see,
experiential learning.
Oh, and is this Andrew's chart? Yeah.
Yeah, this is their charts overlaid.
So in the inside we have Queen Elizabeth. On the outside is Prince Andrew. So we're just looking at their synastry and how their charts interact with one another, how this can build a relationship between them. So you guys already said earlier, he has his moon sitting on her midheaven and her Saturn. So he might be bringing his secrets and family secrets on top of her reputation. And because his moon is in a weakened state in Scorpio, not particularly happy. And in Scorpio, you know, a sign that's associated with some of the more shadowy things, the kind of darker things that we don't like to talk about. This is kind of what it's looking like, right?
Sometimes astrology is so literal, because when I saw that,
Very
I was like, oh, wow. So your secrets and the things you don't want to talk about are going to bring your mother headaches, literally.
Yeah, but I feel like, you know, again, the moon having like triplicity in Scorpio. So like, you know, there's sect or elemental agreement, and then the moon being in its own decan. And Scorpio is like him benefiting from mommy's protection very much, like doing
which
all
is
the
like
shady
literally
shit.
what he's doing right now.
He's like doing all the
up and
shady
down
shit,
moral,
like
yeah, like, oh,
hiding behind her
me.
skirts.
Hiding behind her skirts, or under her skirt, to be honest.
Yeah. Because like the people that are trying to serve him papers like cannot get to Balmoral, so he's literally just camped out there right now.
She's literally the gatekeeper. Like whenever I see Saturn like doing anything and somebody being so Saturnian, which, you know, she's pretty Saturnian, surprisingly. Like,
and like his Saturn opposite her Pluto.
Oh my God, how did I
point
miss
that out? I got lost.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So there
we go.
Holy crap, that's tight. That's a really tight opposition. That's wow, that's close.
So what do we tend to see with that dynamic?
Well, just thinking again of those Plutonic themes again, and like how he's maybe kind of like the embodiment of those, you know, so he's the one that went outside and like did the things that maybe were secreted in her family for a long time.
Yeah, I think Saturn also has to do with like boundaries and rules, and like, you know, I think of the fact that Saturn is like the last of the visible planets, like before we get to the outers. And you know, like whenever I see Saturn opposite Pluto, like I mean, like this would have, you know, his birth would have been like that transit for her. Like I don't remember what was going on, but like I don't know if she was having marital issues at that time when he was born. So like I know, because I know that there was a time where like she and Philip were having issues. He was rumored to have like stepped out on her and like all this other stuff. So like, you know, like Saturn has to do with like, you know, rules and like, you know, the limits of like limits, but also like, you know, the limits in terms of like, you know, what's visible in terms of like difficult things, because Saturn and Pluto equally rule heavy difficult topics, but Pluto's a little less conscious and like things like that, whereas Saturn is kind of like materializing that and bringing some of that into our awareness. So like I don't remember what was going on with her like marriage to Philip, but I know that there were issues at one point. And like, you know, he would have been born around the time that like Saturn would have been like making all these aspects or hits to her Pluto in the 7th. So you know, like yeah, that's like
it
all
also would have been in conjunct her moon too.
Yeah, and you know, the local ascendant when he was born was on her moon. So like again, like this is feeling like something about like Andrew's birth is like tied in with like whatever relational dynamics Elizabeth was having with Philip, just because the moon is also representative of Philip in her chart. Philip himself has a Leo moon. Philip himself has like, you know, freaking the ascendant like not too far from this part of Leo as well. So like, you know, there's something going on there, I think.
Okay. I think we also have Andrew's Pluto is pretty much trine to his mother's sun as well. So, I mean, I think we've discussed too that I think him being her favorite child is interesting, because there are definitely certain traits in this chart that speak to them, maybe even confiding in each other about some of these things. So I'm not sure how this Sun Pluto, maybe there's something about this that she understands. I'm not sure, I don't know. I really don't know how this happened.
It's interesting because, his Mars Venus squares her sun. So it's,
and for those who are watching, it's an out of sign square because it is in late Capricorn. But by degree, they are beginning to square because those planets are applying into the sign of Aquarius. Okay. So that is a square. Anything else? Oh, we have that lovely Mercury Venus between them. His Mercury in Pisces is conjunct her Venus.
Oh yeah, I see. I have to like exit out of that. And then it doesn't, I'll just
when I saw this between them, I was like, oh, so they talk about this stuff. They talk about a lot of things, I think. I do think they have long discussions about various things, and it's easy for them to talk to one another, most likely. So does she know everything? It's possible.
Yeah,
it's very possible.
Maybe that he's the one that she can talk to, because it does seem that family has issues with communication. So you might latch on to that person that you have easy flowing, communication with, even if they're not the best person to talk to in the moment.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm sure there's an emotional component to this too, because we do have, moon, both of them have their moon on the angles. So the moon is on sensitive points. So I do think between the two, there's some emotional dynamic here that feeds this. And they have suns exactly sextile to one another. So there is an ease between them that she probably doesn't have for her other children. Like say Charles as a Scorpio sun, I can see why that could be a little bit tense.
Charles is like on her Saturn.
Oh yeah.
Wearing her Mars. Like
so
I can see it.
You can see why these two might be in cahoots with one another. Now, whether or not Granny or Mom should be doing this, your son is in his 60s now. He should be fending for himself and not hiding behind his mother. But these are some pretty serious charges, and I can see why he's hiding.
You would think, but hey.
Don't forget Pluto.
Oh, did I not erase Pluto?
Pluto in Cancer.
Oh yeah, it's right there.
Right. I'm like,
see, Pluto doesn't want you to see how he's moving.
Exactly. I missed him.
Full stealth mode.
Stealth mode, Pluto.
Right. Anything else about these two?
No.
Alrighty. Moving on. So, as we know, Prince Andrew has gone very far in his attempts to avoid being served this civil suit, and the lawyers are prepared to serve him on horseback. But I'm sure he drives away like a Jupiter and Sag. No, you can't get me.
I just thought that was so interesting. Yeah, Jupiter and Sag that we were talking about, and then seeing him on horseback, and I'm like, that's interesting.
2 black horses. Oh, come on. We'll be literal now.
Like, how literal are we gonna get?
Yeah.
Oh man.
So it'll be interesting to see if he decides to face up to the music or not, because it's not gonna be good.
I mean, especially with the nodes in Sagittarius, it's a South Node at least. We'll see how things change when the nodes entered into Taurus and Scorpio next. Into his 4th house. Bring family secrets. That moon's about to get eclipsed, guys.
Fun times.
I'm ready to see what gets exposed. So
it's gonna be some rocking times in the news. So again, if you are sensitive to these kind of things, please take care of yourself. You do not need to watch if it's triggering or upsetting, right? But this stuff does need to be handled in a public fashion, because this is not the kind of stuff that we should be having around the world, right?
Yeah.
All right, so next up we have Sarah Ferguson, Duchess of York, Prince Andrew's ex-wife, who still lives with him and still seems to be his defender.
And who has, lately this past week been invited to Balmoral to see the Queen along with Prince Andrew, which is interesting. It's rumored that she can come to Balmoral now because Prince Philip is dead. Queen Elizabeth husband who hated Fergie with a passion and didn't want her around. So now that she's kind of showing loyalty, I guess, and sticking by Andrew's side or something, then she's getting rewarded with these trips to Balmoral, and has been showing support for Andrew. And she also does have she had financial dealings with Epstein in the past. He did loan her money and make sure that she got a fair amount of cash. So there's that.
Oh boy, here we go. It's never a good look when someone who's engaged in international sex trafficking is giving you loans, kiddo.
Just don't do it.
No way to spin it. No way to be like, well, what? All right, Miss Sarah. So what do we see right away with Sarah? Oh, who has Jupiter in Sag as well?
He does. Square Pluto.
Where Pluto? And she also has Venus conjunct Pluto. So Persephone is right next door to Hades in Sarah's chart and on the midheaven. So what is she now known for? Okay, so that's an interesting story. What else we got going on in this chart?
Yeah, I do want to comment on the Venus because it represents her partner, right? And like, again, we were talking about Andrew and his appetites, right? So and, like, this is a very, very, very like loud configuration.
Venus represents the partner because Taurus is on the 7th house cusp for people who are following along, right? Yeah. So Venus rules over her 7th house and Venus rules over her 12th house. Oh, Jesus, here we go. So her 7th house and her 12th house's secrets are tied up together.
Yeah, and like, look at the fact that Venus is in her depression in or fallen in Virgo.
In Virgo.
Like, maybe, and for the fact that, like, the 11th house has to do with like, networks of people. It's like, maybe like interacting with people like you shouldn't be like, yes, like, you're in a position to like interact with anybody because, it's a Venus in a good house. It's Venus like in with triplicity, like, I think approaching her like terms like in Virgo, but like, again, there might be issues with like discernment around who you should be engaging with.
Yeah, also a desire to please her partner quite a lot and do whatever it takes to make that partner happy and service the partner at their own expense.
Yeah, very much so.
One thing I also see is that where Andrew had Jupiter in the bends, Sarah has Saturn in the bends from the 3rd house. Right? So Saturn is between her nodes in Libra and Aries. Saturn rules over her 3rd house because Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. And Capricorn also rules over her 4th house in Aquarius, right? So there's a story around, where I'm traveling to, who I'm talking to, my family, that kind of stuff is involved with my line of fate, right?
Yeah, no, I think also like, there's this element of like, I'm seeing the trine between Venus and Saturn, and like just because Venus is in the 11th house, which I would say would have to do with media, and like the 3rd house can have to do with that kind of stuff as well. Like, I'm wondering if there's an element of like, her relationship with the press that comes up, because I know she's been doing a lot of interviews lately, especially because I think she's actually about to go into a Capricorn year.
She's on a book tour. Actually, she wrote a book, so she's been in the press a little bit more, and she's had a contentious relationship with the press, kind of goes in ups and downs a lot, which you can see with like, the trine of like a benefic and a malefic. Oh, you're for me, you're against me, you're on my side, you're not.
Interesting. Okay, so we'll definitely be watching that Saturn. I mean, I think it'd be interesting to watch or look at the timing of when all these stories start to come out, because we just finished up those eclipses in Capricorn and Cancer last year.
Oh, right? Do I remember? Yes.
So towards the end of probably spring going into summer of last year was probably when this Saturn was receiving the brunt of those eclipses. which was probably around the time that Andrew did that abysmal interview.
And that
Yeah.
apparently was, big stress on his family. So, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And then we see this Neptune again casting a fog over that first.
Neptune, Mercury, huh?
Yeah, Neptune conjunct Mercury.
Wow, who am I? You don't see me, now you see me. Illusion.
It could also be a little bit of, on a bad day, Mercury, Neptune could be lying.
Yeah, deception.
On a good day, it can be very creative and having a way with words, maybe a very beautiful way with words, which is why she is in book writing. Now, whether or not her books are good, I don't know. I've never purchased one. I've never read one. But I think she's had a few. She's done some children's books, mainly.
I'll just stay quiet on my opinion on her books.
She's done some children's books.
I'm curious. I want to hear the opinion.
I don't. I mean, I think I'd be hard pressed to believe she actually wrote them
herself.
Interesting.
Just because most famous people hire a ghostwriter.
You know what? Like, actually, like, given her her like Mercury placement, like conjunct Neptune, I wouldn't be surprised if she had a ghostwriter. Like,
I mean, doesn't that say ghostwriter to you?
It screams ghostwriter to me.
Yeah.
Okay. Like it really does. Like I would imagine that, it's not that she doesn't have the ideas, but in terms of like the way to structure books so that, people will like to read them. Like, I don't know about her writing them herself, but like, like, I mean, I'm also just thinking about her, like the fact that her ascendant ruler Mars and her 10th whole sign house ruler the Sun are really unhappy in Libra. They're in the 12th for one. For two, like, the Sun is fallen in Libra. Mars is in detriment in Libra. And so there might be this people pleasing element. And like, for the fact that like both of these planets that rule like her and like the way she carries herself and what she does, it's like, how much does like people pleasing really get you? If anything, I would imagine that it gets her into more trouble.
Right.
Not,
And I think she's prone. Oops, sorry. Go ahead, Janelle.
Oh no, continue your thought, Kelly.
Oh no, it was just looking at that Aries moon that not only do you try to people please, but you make those impulsive rash decisions to do so. Like no one's holding you back.
Yeah, she's technically an eclipse baby too, just because like the moon is like, she was born just after, like it's kind of like far, but like depending on like, how soon the moon could get there, she could be an eclipse baby, but like she was born pretty close to eclipse season, so like there is that.
I would also add, I mean, that moon is receiving a lot of stress from the inconjuncts between Pluto, Venus, and then that Mercury, Neptune as well is all converging. Those green lines that you see, that's like a hammer of Thor slamming that moon down. That moon is also in control of her 9th house of publications and also maybe a little bit of media as well. The moon is on the South Node in the 6th house. So it's not exactly a great placement to have if you're trying to have good, media or international play of any kind, I would say. And then also I was thinking about the fact that Mercury conjunct Neptune, at least that Mercury, is in control of her midheaven, and it's also in control of her 8th house. So again, we're seeing this recurring theme about we're not getting the whole truth about what's really happening with this lady. I don't think so, especially with Neptune involved with Mercury and in the sign of Scorpio. There's a lot of effort to hide things, but because those planets are in the 1st house, I think it's a little bit more difficult. People know what they're up to, but they keep trying to kind of throw this haze of, no, we're not doing that. It's like, no, you are doing that. We can see you're doing it.
I'm glad you brought up Mercury ruling the 8th, because like one of its closest aspects is a sextile with Venus, who again rules her partner, but also rules like hidden enemies and like things like that. So it's like, you know what, maybe like through her partner, like there was the ability to resolve debt, but like, the means might have been really shady.
because I think also, aside from the Epstein money, they had also taken money, I think, from a Saudi prince, or the Saudi prince had bought one of their properties, but it was very shady. People were asking questions like, how did this happen? Like, this property is not worth the amount that he gave you.
Yeah,
So
I think it might have even been like a dictator or something, like an oligarch, someone like with really like bad human rights violations, like totally bought their home for over market value.
These two have had some financial troubles. And I think that moon in Aries, I think for her, and also Jupiter and Sag in the second house is a thing for her. So she might have, money might burn in her hand.
Yeah, she just goes through it. Like
she goes through
like
it.
Water, you know?
Because they've probably had to sell those properties to make money because they've mismanaged the funds that they've had.
I'm like probably a little like optimistic about it, but like the impression I get is that like it's not that they're not in debt, but it's like I think they undersell how much money they actually have, because they probably have way more money through their dealings with people, and they don't want people to know, like especially if like the money was not acquired through like the best of means. That makes sense. So you kind of gotta like make people look like because like her debt was like miraculously like resolved and things like that. But I don't know, like just with that Jupiter in the second and like just knowing the transits that she's gonna have coming up, it's like I think like the whole like we don't really have money, like, I think they're gonna be outed for having a little more money than they want to tell people about, but that's just me.
Yeah, because like they want to know where the money's coming from. They want to know how it's being spent, especially because they have this public money funding the majority of their lifestyle. All of these palaces and things like that they live in, usually it's being paid out of the public pocket, it seems like, or whatever the allocation is. I could be wrong on the details, but this is my income and I'm paying for stuff. This is taxpayer money involved. Now, if you're hiding under other monies that are, illicit and illegal, that's also a problem. Right? It's bad. It's bad news bears. So
I don't know. I feel like with the emergence of Jupiter back into Pisces, like at the very end of this year, and like at the same time, I know the South Node will be rolling over her Jupiter. Like, I feel like they're going to be outed for having a little more money than they were saying.
It's interesting because I'm very curious that why they have to go to these other players to get money when the family has. And I wonder how much of that is power dynamics of trying to keep them under control by making sure they get into bad situations like this, right? Andrew and Fergie can't leave the protection of the crown because they are in so much trouble now.
Well, Andrew did have to give up his civil list money, so.
Okay, fine, but he's not in prison, so.
No,
right?
No, I mean like that's another way to control him because then the money is coming from his mom, so.
Pluto has elements of control, manipulation, obsession, possession. You can't leave. And if you do try to leave, as we saw with Meghan and Harry, we're going to make it as difficult as possible, which is why them escaping is such a big deal, because they might be the first to get out alive and be able to make money.
Yeah, like no, and I really think that some of those questions, like especially for Fergie, because like she's gonna go into the Capricorn year, and like one of the first transits that happens is that big ass Venus retrograde at the end of Capricorn, again bringing up these questions about like controlling resources and things and blah blah blah, and like like with Venus conjoining Pluto in that decan and like squaring like her sun and her Mars, like I feel like between the shit Andrew's going to go through, because like I think that this is not going away. Like things about her in the press are going to get exposed because of her association with her partner. It's not going to reflect good on her, just because like it is squaring the planet that rules her. It's squaring the planet that rules her reputation, and there might be scrutiny about her role in everything, how much she knew. And again, like I think that's where the whole element of control comes in. Like I'm sure that the family also knows like more than they're letting on about like what Fergie and Andrew have been up to monetarily, but also what Andrew has really done.
It's interesting that right now in the sky, the nodes are squaring that Venus and Pluto, especially that Pluto. So all of this is fated to be coming out around this time.
Mhm.
So
Yup.
I don't know, Sarah. It's not looking too hot, girl.
Mhm.
Not
Better
looking
cut
good.
your losses, girl.
Get
You
away
got
from
a real
him.
job, girl.
Get a real job. Get away from that man.
Staying in this
Like,
crazy family. All right. Anything else about Miss Sarah Ferguson?
no.
Alrighty. Moving on to her, and I think Andrew's charts together as to why these two can't seem to stay out of trouble. So
I
we
will
have
say they have the same exact north node, but what's it called? Lot of Fortune. You know, which is interesting. And like because like the lot of fortune can function like a second ascendant sometimes, like something about their approach to circumstances or the circumstances that surround them like brings them together. So them like gravitating towards each other, it makes a lot of sense.
So here we have Prince Andrew's on the inside and Sarah's on the outside of the chart. Let's see, I always think their shared Jupiter sign is a big deal. So Jupiter being in her second house, Jupiter being in his fifth house, seeing how this overlay might kind of interact, you know, these two have a lot of energy for spending and, excuse my French, fucking, essentially.
Listen, oh my God, no, like, can we talk about her Jupiter? Because Jupiter is also her fifth house ruler, but she has a Pisces fifth. Like his like little Pisces consortium lives in her fifth. Her fifth house ruler is Antisha, his Venus, like exactly, pretty much. So like I feel like that, like certain elements of like, you know, her approach to like maybe like, you know, sex, romance, but also her approach to money, like enables his own like, you know, appetites around like, you know, using his family name and fame, claim to fame to like, you know, really exploit things. Like, so I think that, you know, that does come into play.
For those who are listening, if you haven't heard of the Antisha before, Antishas are basically mirror points in astrology. So if you were to fold the chart in half between Sagittarius and Capricorn, they would fall into each other's signs. So Jupiter at 1 degree of Sagittarius, if you fold it over, becomes 29 or 28 degrees of Capricorn. So that Jupiter is technically sitting on that Venus by Antisha. You just kind of do that for the rest of the chart. So Sagittarius to Capricorn.
Look at the Saturn. Look at her Saturn to his Jupiter. Like her Saturn's at 1 degree Cap and his Jupiter is at 28.
Yeah.
So remember, like we were talking about her maybe thinking she could like rein him in, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, so Saturn, even by conjunction, Saturn is
it's like
sitting on that Jupiter.
Conjunct, right?
And also Antisha. So just going through the zodiac real quick, it'd be Capricorn, Sagittarius, Scorpio, Aquarius, Libra, Pisces, Aries, Virgo, Leo, Taurus, let me see that, and Gemini, Cancer. Right, so just folding the chart in half for the mirror points. Okay, what else about this chart did we see? Interesting. It's funny that they've remained friends despite divorcing.
Why did they divorce? I don't remember.
I don't remember why they divorced.
Apparently, it was just a lot of fighting.
I was saying
they were married
because her Mars is sitting on his IC. That's what I was thinking. I was just like, they were probably fighting quite a bit at home, if anything. And then they also have a Mars square, right? She has Mars in Libra, and he has Mars in Capricorn. So this can either be, you know, clashing and bumping heads, or again, quite a good libido, because it is Venus, Mars to Mars as well.
I think it was probably good sex in the beginning that turned into fighting.
Especially when the finances start to go south and the lifestyles could not be contained or maintained. And of course, if you're spending money, you know, hanging out with sex traffickers, that could also complicate things. Because how to explain why you need money? Where are you spending it on? Oh, my trips to Epstein's private island?
Yeah, like what's going on there, dude? I mean, I feel like, you know, again, her living in his fourth house with her ascendant and like Mercury and Neptune, like she knows a lot more about
And
like
she
and
literally
things like
lives
that.
in his house.
She
Yeah.
lives in this house.
Literally.
Yes, she does.
Mm,
Now it's probably a huge house with wings, and she could probably stay in one wing and never ever see him. But it is
It's
still a
just
little bit
there.
It's literal astrology again, where you're like, okay. Because sometimes, when you're talking to clients, you're like running through and you kind of, sometimes they start with like, okay, like this is the most literal one, and you kind of move down and you find out like where it hits. And then sometimes it's just like literal, like so-and-so lives
literally
in
his
your house.
She has access to all the secrets.
Mhm.
This the fourth house can be a very secretive house as well. And I feel like it's understated. Like she's in there, she's deep in there.
Oh yeah, and she's also in his eighth house, right? Because her IC from the fifth falls into his eighth.
Yep. She's in his eighth. Yep. She really is.
She knows all of it. I think when you look at this, you're like, she's not a bystander, right? Like, oh, I don't know what's going on. Like, no, she's like intimately involved in like his stuff, like his deep secrets.
Well, yeah, she's like his confidant apparently as well.
We have a nice Mercury trine roughly. Let's see what else. Venus is trying to out of sign, but not out of sign, out of orb, but by element, they have Venus trines and things like that. So they do have a lot in common. I can see why they got married. There's also some antitia between their sons too, conjunction. Yeah. So I see why they got married, but I also see why they're in so much trouble. For sure. Because their inability to stop is probably what got them here. They got in way too deep and were spending too much money doing not so great things, living the high life, and unfortunately exploiting people sexually at the same time. So this is heavy duty karma to really rack up. And so, this is interesting as astrologers to see, because often people get really afraid around certain transits and, returns. It's like, listen, if you've been behaving well, you shouldn't really have too much to fear, right? This is just this is the culmination of all your actions and behaviors over the year kind of coming to a head to be seen. Now, these two have a lot to fear if the people that they're hanging out with and getting involved with have secrets and bodies and all sorts of fun stuff. So, and they're public figures. So there's nowhere that they can really hide around this. There's nowhere to hide.
Yeah, like I'm just trying to think of transits coming up for the both of them. Like honestly, that Venus retrograde in Capricorn, not looking too great. Because that's an extended Venus return for Andrew, and I think
when's that again?
Right?
Just for everybody.
That is the 19th of December this year, and it ends around the 29th of January, early next year. So Venus stations around 26 degrees, conjunct Pluto, and then stations direct at about 11 of Capricorn. So that's not going to be looking good for all their late cardinal stuff. It just doesn't look good. Anybody who is near Epstein, and I've noticed that if they don't have like third decan Capricorn placements, they have third decan cardinal placements, and they're all like freaking out, and they all have activations coming up in the next couple years. So it's just not looking very good.
Yeah, and that Mars for her, so her Mars at 25 Libra is receiving that square from Pluto in Capricorn right now. And that Mars is in control of her ascendant, her Mercury, and that Neptune that we were just talking about, that's hiding, obscuring some of that stuff. Now, if that Mars is getting Pluto, Pluto tends to unearth things. He tends to kind of say, oh, look at all of these dirty, squiggly things you got. You want to clean that up? Because it's not really helping you anymore. And usually the process can be quite intense. It can be soul scorching type thing. And, the thing with Pluto, it's change or die. And sometimes it's very, very literal. And if you don't change, parts of your life, and even you sometimes can check out.
And then you have the nodes moving to the Taurus Scorpio axis that's highlighting all of that family stuff, family and public, reputation type stuff. And I think when that happens too, like, I don't know how you avoid just being blasted when you have all of that hitting all of those different parts of your chart.
Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide.
With the Taurus eclipse coming up on the 18th of November this year, it's actually happening at about like 27 Taurus, so it's opposing Andrew's moon. And you know, like that's a 7th house transit for Sarah. I mean, I don't think it's really hitting anything in her chart like in late fixed signs, but like that to me is just like giving, it's definitely Andrew related. It will have to do with his reputation, but like because it's still Taurus moons and they are eclipsed, like it's still an exalted moon, like even if it's eclipsed, right? So I think this will be like positive damage control for his public image, because like transiting Jupiter will be squaring the eclipse, and like Jupiter rules his 8th. Jupiter will be in that 3rd decan of Aquarius, like again hitting his natal moon as well. This is feeling like again the queen, his mommy, bankrolling his settlement for whatever.
Yeah, I wonder if in November they won't make a settlement offer of some kind.
They might.
Yeah,
I really predict that, you know, that's the settlement offer. But like I think as you know, we all talked about you know, in preparing for this, like I think more people will be encouraged to come forward.
As soon as you settle with a big settlement, what do? You make it so that other people will also feel like they can come forward and also sue you.
Which will make, you know, more of these articles about just how much money they have start to come out, because they keep kind of dripping, you know, Charles has this here, the queen has this here. So it's going to put the entire family up for, you know,
review. Where's this coming from? Where is this money coming from? You know, because right now supposedly she's paying, the queen's paying for this from the Duchy of Lancaster or something, which I was like, okay, but it's like, why does she have that? Like, you know, why does she have crown lands that are like not available to have their records scrutinized? You know, like what's that about?
You know, and now I'm thinking about the moon, because like technically, like if you do triplicity lords, you can break up like topics of houses, and like because Andrew's 8th whole sign house is Pisces, the moon would be the final triplicity lord, and it has to do with like inheritance assets. It's in the 4th house in Scorpio,
so family assets.
You know, mom using hidden money that nobody knows about to pay for to miraculously settle all of this, like just with the moon, like that eclipse happening, and like, you know, like trying to make this go away financially. Like I think it's gonna backfire, obviously, but they're gonna try and settle this, I think.
Well, we'll see, because when they do that, like we've been saying, it's going to make everyone else's finances up for review. And sketchy. It's really interesting. I'm so thankful that Harry and Meghan got out, because they don't have to be a part of this, because they have their own income. They're not getting money.
Looking at it back now, it may be the best thing that ever happened that they basically like their like offer to do half and half wasn't accepted. Like that may have been a saving grace intervention for them. Yeah.
The God was like, no, get out.
Yeah. The more I think about that, like I'm sure that was a heavy blow for them, but it may have been a blessing for them in the long run.
Yeah, I agree.
Anything else about these two?
No.
Alrighty. And listeners and watchers, if you have anything that you want to add, please feel free to add into the comments. If you're seeing things in these charts that we may have missed, we love to have astrology conversations. So what's going on? A former employee of Epstein said he was willing to testify under oath that he saw Andrew groping, how do you pronounce her name? Miss
Giroux? Something like that. Sorry, I forgot to look it up.
On Epstein's
Please correct us.
Island. There may also be other staff willing to testify. Okay, so we definitely need to keep eyes on the people who want to come forward, because now these are still dangerous times for people who are coming forward about abuse like this, especially when their abusers are people in such high positions of power. Right? So
there were, though, I think a lot of people, you know, on and off that island, especially Epstein's Island. So hopefully more people will be like comfortable enough to come forward and testify, because that's got to be scary, but hopefully they can make it safe somehow for them.
I mean, I know that Ghislaine Maxwell is still in prison, and I know
Right.
there's another friend of Andrew who's in prison. I think it's Peter Nygaard.
Nygaard,
who
yeah.
was,
Yeah,
I
he just
believe
got busted on trafficking.
Was that in
charges as
Canada?
well.
Did he get-
No, he got extradited from Canada to somewhere. I can't remember if it was the US or somewhere in Europe, but
But he as well had an island that Andrew liked to visit and abuse people on as well, allegedly. Allegedly. This
Well, I think Epstein isn't allegedly, right? That was proven. So I don't think you have to say allegedly for that
I don't
one.
know, but like, I mean, I didn't watch, but like, I know CBC here in Canada had like a fifth estate, which is like their equivalent of like, you know, the little investigative things that like, you know, ABC, NBC, and CNN have. Like, they did an episode on Peter Nygaard and like people, you know, describing their experiences with him, people who came forward, like things like that. But you know, I think pretty soon, like especially like I don't know what's happening with Peter Nygaard right now, but like, you know, him getting extradited, I think it was last summer actually. He got extradited from his place in Canada to somewhere else. Like that was a huge deal up here. Like
because isn't he like a big fashion designer up
he's
in
a
Canada?
big fashion guy. Yeah, he's a huge fashion guy. So you know, whatever happens with that, especially if Andrew has ties to this dude, that doesn't look good for him between like Epstein and, you know, Nygaard and like whoever else he was like friends with during his like wild and fast times on, you know, the Andrew Express. Like I mean it just doesn't look good. Where there's smoke there's fire, and like him associating with all these people is really suspect.
Yeah.
Right.
What's the saying? Show me who your friends are and I'll tell you who you are.
Yeah.
So these are at least two friends that we know of, right?
That's not even mentioning all of the other people he hung out with, like Gaddafi, other dictators. What was those, like a Libyan arms dealer guy, like drug and gun runner guy, and you're like,
Mr. Kevin Spacey as well has hung out and sat on the throne, and we know that Spacey has had a couple of accusers, and I think one mysteriously died when he was wanting to testify. So these are the kind of things that we're talking about, right? And it's funny how it's very quiet about Kevin Spacey too. It's just like now he's back in Hollywood. I'm like, what's going on? So there's a lot of protection behind the scenes happening for people who have done this, because I think there's a lot of people involved. A lot of people that we know probably by name and by face involved too. So this is dicey times. So please send a lot of love and light for those who are brave enough to step forward, because they will need that kind of protection going forward. Okay, so royal family dark entanglements. Prince Charles also had some relationships with some disgraced sexual offenders. There was the Jimmy Savile, who was a TV personality in the UK. I believe he had a children's show at one point.
Yeah, he did.
So that was a quite the well for him to draw upon when he wanted to do such things. And then also Bishop Peter Ball, who was accused of, I think, of sexually abusing a couple of, I think it was 18 young boys, I believe.
Yeah, somewhere around there, yeah.
And I believe he did he do some jail time, or he was found guilty? And then after, when he got out, Prince Charles bought him a house, I think.
Yeah.
And then there was also Lord Louis Mountbatten, who was the one who was actually killed in a boat explosion, supposedly by the IRA, which is, I believe, what the Irish, like, not rebellion, but they are the people who are saying, you know, please don't oppress us, essentially. we want our own land, our own language, our own culture, please. So supposedly he was also abusing young boys in the Concord Boys Home.
Allegedly. Like he had ties to the boys' home, and I guess now there's like accusations being made in articles and biographies that have been published more recently that supposedly they do have, you know, testimonies from boys who grew up in that boys' home about being abused by the uncle to Prince Philip, Lord Louis Mountbatten.
So Lord Mountbatten was also an influence on Charles, and I'm assuming Andrew as well as young boys. So if they were hanging out with Uncle Louis, they might have been exposed to some of this stuff pretty early on.
Well, and I think it also speaks to the protection that's given to men, powerful men in this family, to, you know, a lot of cover is like given to them to pursue kind of their darker side with little repercussions of any kind. And Prince Charles is still out there. It's like, how, like, come on, you guys, like, what are you doing?
Yeah. So, woof. It's not looking too hot.
It's not. It's really not.
So apparently Lord Mountbatten had offered his own niece to Charles to marry when she was 17.
Yeah.
Which is weird because I'm assuming that's also Charles's cousin.
Yeah, it's been like his third cousin or something. I'm bad at generations, but it's something like that. But I mean, Elizabeth and Prince Philip were cousins, so.
I know, it's a lot. It's a cultural shock for those of us who are not used to marrying cousins.
It is. It really is.
He may have tried to persuade Amanda to marry Charles, you know, marry a young, compliant girl, and ended up choosing the young princess, Princess Diana, Lady Diana. So, you know, we're not going to talk about Diana's chart today, but I mean, personally, I do feel like Diana was groomed to be in this position, to have his children, and then to put up with everything else that he was doing. Because she was a young, sheltered, you know, fairly abused girl. Her family life was not easy. There was abusive elements. It would have been a perfect fit. She is someone who has a fragile personality and doesn't have a lot of fight in her, or so they thought, and that's why they chose her, right? To the point where Camilla was writing her letters and, oh, welcome to the family. Like, girl, what in the world? So it was a setup. And to do that, you need someone who's young and naive, who doesn't know any better, who doesn't recognize abuse, to be able to be in that position.
Which is why Meghan didn't work when she was in it. She's like, wait a second.
Wait a minute. I've been out in the world. I've seen some stuff. I've gone to school. I'm educated. You can't run these games on me, right? I also work with powerful people. You're not the only people in the world. But if you're 19 years old and there's a handsome prince putting attention on you, of course you're going to swoon for anything.
Yeah.
Although Diana did know that she was, like she said, the lamb to the slaughter. She knew what was, not that she knew what she was getting into, but she knew it wasn't on the up and up. So, Kanga. I forgot about Kanga.
Yeah. Like,
the other mistress.
I want to say we're pivoting because, like, if you're in, like, you know, royal TikTok or royal, like, tea streams, like, this is starting to pick up again. So that's why we're bringing it up.
Yes. So we're bringing up Kanga because, why are we bringing up Kanga? What was Kanga in the news recently this week? Yes. Or at least on TikTok. She started
TikTok.
Yeah, she's trending on TikTok for a minute. Yeah.
So I've heard about Kanga before. Kanga was one of Charles's mistresses back in the day. Apparently Charles had about 6 mistresses, supposedly, and she was one of them. And I knew about her because I watched a documentary about her maybe a year or two back, when it was still on the internet. But since there's so much trouble right now for the family, a lot of things have been scrubbed off of YouTube, unfortunately. But if I can find a 10-minute flick or clip about her, I will add it to the description box below. But Kanga, in her involvement with this family, met a tragic end. So, does any of you guys want to tell this story?
I don't know. I think, Mo, you go. I think you saw the most of them. Yeah.
Okay.
It's your turn.
Okay, like, you're putting me on the spot, so, like, you know, I'm, like, too young to really appreciate any of this crap, but, like, anyway, from what I do know from, like, my internet searching / like TikTok, is that apparently, like, he was good friends with her husband, who apparently, like, gifted her to him or something, which is apparently common practice amongst people who hang out with, like, the royal set in general. And, you know, like, I think what they were, like, involved until, like, Charles was going to get married. Like he was on and off like between like Diana and Camilla. Like he was like in this period of like, oh, I need to like pick. He was being pressured to pick like a spouse. And, like he was entertaining all these freaking women. Like literally, I think he was like dating at least like a few different like prominent women between like, you know, 1973 and like, you know, the early 80s when he like and Diana finally tied the knot. But like, you know, like I think the thing is like he ended things with I think he either ended things with like both Kanga and Camilla, like once he like committed to Diana, like things were going sour, things were going south, like with him and Diana, and like he decided to, you know, start running the field again. You know, him and Camilla were already close anyways, like it didn't matter. And you know, Kanga, I guess, got frozen out because she started like getting too like comfortable with like the press or like talking to people about what was going on. She wasn't discreet enough. And so like, you know, Charles like officially just chose Camilla and like continued his affair with her. Like this was like early. I don't know if this was like before. No, this was after. This must have been after Harry, I think, because apparently things were okay up until like Harry was born, and then like all the shit started happening. And so like it's weird how like he named like so like because he was close to both of these women and their husbands or whatever the hell, like you know, they both had sons in other like marriages who like had like his name. It's funny because they both hated each other's guts. Like, you know, like she kept wanting to like, you know, tell people about, yeah, like I'm banging Charles basically. He didn't like that. So like he kicked her out of his circle, like, you know, and I think the icing on the cake was that, you know, eventually she formed an alliance with Diana. And like in theory, like she was using like she was kind of using like Diana to like, you know, get back at Charles a bit, but also to like keep tabs on what he was doing and like irritate him. Like she designed a couple of dresses for her. She wore them and like, you know, apparently like, you know, she was eventually like deemed like crazy and like having issues. And so they institutionalized her. She might have been pushed out of a window, but she miraculously fell unexplainably. And, you know, she had her spine shattered. And then not too long after that, her husband like divorced her and got her like sectioned or something. And then like she, you know, went to India for some reason and she got septicemia, and like the doctor who was treating her, who's apparently friends with Charles, like as people who like did their research or homework found out, like it's just interesting like the coincidence. And like when we looked at like the date of her death, like I think it was like the day after his birthday, and like what, 1997, like a few months after Diana had died. So it's you know, like it's a bit sus. It's a bit sus.
It was definitely like her sin was she couldn't keep like, you know, her mouth quiet. Like Camilla was really good. She never good according to the royal family. Like she wouldn't like talk to the press much at all, but like, you know, Kanga would. So
okay, so let's take a look at Miss Kanga. So for those who are watching, we do not have Kanga's birth time, unfortunately, but we do believe we're playing with the time that we think works a little bit for right now. I find that sunrise charts with the ascendant matching the sun can give a lot of information, even if you don't have a time. So in this chart, tentatively, we have the sun in Capricorn and a Capricorn ascendant. Moon and midheaven in Libra with Neptune, Jupiter in Saturn the 12th. Yeah, so you know we have a little chart here, North Node in the 5th, right? So I think Kanga was in fashion, you said?
Yeah, later in her life, yeah, she did have a fashion line.
Okay, so we kind of like that for the midheaven in Libra, and North Node in the 5th. Where is Venus?
In the 2nd, and Aquarius.
Aquarius. Okay, so making money from that a career would be possible if that's what she did. So that's a possibility, but we're not sure. We're just running with it. We're gonna play with this chart. So what else do we notice here?
Saturn ruling the ascendant in its detriment in the 8th house, like
next to Pluto.
At the bendings of the nodes. It's not
Mhm.
very friendly.
Boy. These nodes, these bendings,
nodes.
man.
Mhm.
Jesus. So, aside from, other people's resources and things like that, what else can we talk about via this eighth house, right? We could talk about death, right? An ending.
Mhm. Yeah.
We could talk about some occult things, some shadowy things, right? Witchcraft can also fall into the eighth house. What else can we put in there? Transformation, birth can also fall into that house too. So transitioning from one thing to the other, from not being a parent to becoming a parent could be an eighth house transition as well. So turning from one thing into the other can be the eighth house.
Yeah.
Alchemy, essentially.
Mhm.
So why is this Saturn in Leo in the nodes, in the bends? And we also have the North Node in Taurus, the South Node in Scorpio in the 11th. And for me, I was just like, well, her friends weren't really her friends, possibly.
No.
Yeah.
When you have the South Node in the house, that house tends to be a bit more sensitive and the luck is a little bit less sometimes. You have some lessons. So you have to let go of being too dependent on that house because you're really trying to learn how to be in the North Node side a little bit more, balancing it out. So for her, I should say, the South Node in the 11th in Scorpio is talking about some of her friends may not have been particularly good or up on the up people. They might have been a little bit shadowy, a little bit eighth housey somewhat.
Yep.
And the ruler of that is Mars in Virgo, correct? In the ninth house.
Mhm.
So what is that Mars talking about?
I mean, like when I see ninth house things, I think of like, politics, could be religion, could be beliefs, like running in certain
Publishing.
running in certain like groups that, are known to, when I see Mars in the ninth as well, there can be like controversy. I'm like starting drama a little bit, like
Could also be some fighting in the press. Fighting with the press, fighting in the press. I think also using the public domain as a fighting domain, right? So I think after her accident and her spine was shattered, I think she used to show up in her wheelchair to Prince Charles's polo events. Refusing to be ignored, being like, hey, you remember me? You're your old mistress that you've abandoned.
And Mars also rules the fourth. So her family, she did have a lot of strife at home. She ended up getting divorced and it was sad. Like her family didn't support her at all, really. Even her children, until she got older, like didn't really understand like, what was going on. So
like I'm just looking at the Mercury Sun conjunction in her first house. I mean, I don't like that Mercury rules the house of like illness and injury. And then like, there's this like mutual reception between like the sun and Saturn technically, because they're in each other's signs. But like, I don't know, there's just a lot around like the potential for like, being set up to be like injured.
Armed.
That's like, yeah, it's like being set up like really badly to be harmed. I don't know, it's not good.
And then also, this is also speaking to some health aspects too for Kanga. I believe she had a fair amount of health issues early on in her life. I believe she was born with spina bifida, I believe. And had to go through maybe some surgeries and procedures through her life. There were definitely several times that she's had serious health issues prior to her passing. We see that with the ruler of the six being Mercury, right? This Mercury is pretty much scorched by the sun. And then they're both being ruled by Saturn in detriment from the eighth house next to Pluto. So this is not someone that probably had a lot of physical strength, but she still had probably fortitude to fight, right? But health-wise, things were a little bit precarious, which is why it was probably fairly easy to harm her in a hospital type setting.
Well, yeah, I was looking at that Jupiter potentially in the 12th, maybe, if we're thinking about it, like, since the 12th is hospitals or, where you're sectioned away from other people. So that makes a lot of sense.
Usually Jupiter in the 12th can act like a guardian angel, and maybe it did to an extent, right?
Well, they didn't kill her the first time.
It took a couple of times. Jesus, that's awful.
It's
But I'm assuming that Jupiter may have come in handy throughout her lifetime when she was handling her other health-related issues. Right. So, excuse me. I'm sure she went into the hospital a couple of times and managed to come out until she was unable to in the last time. Right. What else about this chart? And also Uranus is opposite Jupiter too.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
maybe it was just an unstable protection, right? Maybe it wasn't always as strong as it could have been.
Yeah, she couldn't always count on it. Like, where are you, Uranus? Where'd you go?
And Uranus being the sixth, probably speaking to the fact that health was kind of this precarious, moving. It's in the sign of Gemini, so maybe it was back and forth and up and down, and very mutable feeling to her health. Anything else about her?
I don't think so.
Nothing
I
major.
mean, I do also always look at that Venus-Pluto opposition. I'm just always like, oh
how
my
could
gosh.
How could we miss that?
Yeah, like, wow.
See?
Like
Pluto keeps showing up.
Over and over again.
Space very
Like,
prominently in these charts.
Like an applying opposition to Pluto. Okay.
Now, sometimes Pluto sometimes can bring a lot of power and influence. Sometimes I see Pluto a lot in the charts of, like, for example, millionaires. If it's not a Venus Jupiter, it's often a Venus Pluto.
I think for a while there, she was actually flying pretty high in society, and then until she wasn't, which is kind of the other side of Pluto. It works until it doesn't.
Yeah, so I think she was born into a fair amount of wealth. I think she, in Australia, her family has money and power, and you see that in her chart. Venus is sextile to Jupiter, and they're both aspecting Pluto as well in the 8th house, maybe even inheritance or things that came in through the family.
Yeah, I wanted to say that, like, I think it's also quite loud that, like, with the Venus Pluto opposition, that, like, if you see like the 5th house as being like your casual hookup, like, situationship, and like her using her like career or like her like fashion design influence to like get close to Diana so she could like stick it to Charles or like do something. I feel like that obsession is really coming through the Venus Pluto opposition. It's like, I'm leveraging my profession, I'm leveraging my skill sets to like be around and be annoying so that you don't,
Yeah, and you can see, like, she did marry into, high society with that 7th house ruled by the moon right there in the 10th by Libra, like ruled by that Venus in Aquarius in the 2nd. So they brought her even more money, I think, at that point. And recognition. Yeah.
Ultimately, that Venus is ruled by that Saturn, right?
Yeah.
So even though she flew very high, the same people that gave her that wealth and privilege ended up being the people that did her the most harm.
Yeah, it's almost like they let you get to a certain point and then it pulled the rug out from under her, like,
Anything else about Miss Kanga's chart? No. So there's Miss Kanga. Now who's next?
I think it's the chart of her passing. We can just look at that real fast. Yeah. If the old computer will. There you go. Thank you.
There we go. Okay, so actually this is her accident first. So this is the accident where she was pushed out of the window. This is a rough estimate for a date because we know that this happened about 18 months prior to her passing. So we did a rough guess that this was sometime in the middle of July of 96, give or take. And there were just a couple of things that we saw that were just like, ooh, well, that's not great. You could definitely see how an accident might have came about. The first thing that I noticed was Mars and Gemini sitting on top of that Uranus and Gemini in her 6th house, right? So usually when there's an accident, a sudden accident of some sort, you're going to see Mars and Uranus together, usually, which is definitely there. Let's see, Jupiter was sitting on top of her sun in Capricorn that day. Oh, and there was also a square from Saturn in Aries to that Sun and Mercury from her 4th house as well, and opposite her moon. So this was already a challenging time in her chart, where she herself, her physicality, her body, there was some stuff going on. So this would have been an ideal time for an accident. And then also Pluto entered Sagittarius and entered her 12th house. So if there was any powerful figures behind the scenes pulling strings, Pluto in the 12th would definitely signify that.
Yeah, no, I was really drawn to like the Saturn applying to the South Node, like squaring her like 6th house and like 8th house ruler. Like, I don't know, like for the fact that it rules her physicality, it's like maybe someone trying to do harm to her, like out of nowhere. Like, I don't know, it just feels deliberate just because it's Saturn.
It's just plans.
It doesn't feel totally random. Just saying.
So her 6th house ruler and what? 6,000, who's the other ruler? 6,000, 9th house ruler, right?
Yeah.
So that 6th house and 9th house ruler would be Mercury for her in her 1st house, and then Saturn transiting to square that would signify there was a challenge of some sort to that Mercury.
And it
from
was
the 4th house.
Wasn't the rumor that she was threatening to publish letters that she had from Charles? Yeah, I think that's the rumor, is that she made it known that she had written evidence of her affair with Charles. So that's a Mercury ruled thing. So that's that direct challenge to Saturn.
Okay. So Saturn in the 4th, as we said, the 4th house can definitely be a very dark and secretive house. So we're seeing some planets like Pluto and Saturn in secretive houses, kind of giving us a sensation that there was some planning and organizing involved for this event to happen. This was not random. If this was more of a random thing, we'd see more Uranus, we'd see more Neptune, we'd see maybe even some Jupiter, things getting out of control. But Saturn and Pluto, this is planning. This is strategic. This was not an accident, in my opinion.
Also heading towards a new moon, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this would have been like the dark moon. Like that's the
time.
darkest part of the moon is like right here. So like that's when you do things when you don't want them to be seen, either by either luminary, you know?
Yes. So a little astral criminality. If you want to do crime, do it under a dark new moon.
Either
not the full moon.
Either a dark moon or a void of course moon, right? Like,
yes. You don't want anyone to see it, and you don't want anything else to come out of it. So this would have been a great time to do a crime like this. And it's in the 7th house of either open enemies or partners. So because this is her 7th house, and her 7th house ruler represents her partner from the 10th house, that moon in Libra, I wouldn't be surprised if her husband was somehow involved or might have said, I'm looking the other way.
I
don't know what's going on.
Sorry, no idea. It's shady. It's a shady chart.
Oh, and also Neptune's in there too, because we have Neptune in late Capricorn opposite to Mercury as well. So, and opposite that new moon stuff. So this would have been a perfect new moon to get away with a secret crime and just throw shadow over it. She fell out the first floor window. How? Don't know. And she shattered her spine. Don't know how that happened.
Yeah.
Crazy, right? So I think that Mars in Gemini was also the actor.
Yeah.
At least 2 people most likely were involved in this, if this was actually what we think it is. Oh boy. And also Mars was also mutual reception with Saturn? Or no, I made that up. Never mind. But
I was like, oh, wait, what?
I was like, what? Never mind. That's not true. Forgive me. Sometimes you're like, oh, wow, there's more? Anything else, guys?
No.
Nope.
All right, moving on. And then our last slide for Kanga, I think we have. Oh, maybe not. No more slides.
Was that it?
I think so. I think we might have wanted to talk about her death chart really quick. Maybe.
I don't think it's necessary.
No, we were just a bit spooked. We just saw some crazy astrologer like, oh.
It's like literally corresponding with like Charles's solar return around the time for the year. So make of that what you will. That's all I have to say about that.
It was a birthday surprise.
Yeah, I don't know.
Not great. Right. Not great. This is not looking too hot, but this is what Pluto brings up. It makes you really uncomfortable. That is the point.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you want to run and hide. It makes you want to close the door. But unfortunately, once Pluto comes into the picture, there is no running, there is no hiding. You just got to deal with what's going on. All right. So last sips, the royal family has a history of it being at least very indifferent to the cruelty that it shows towards young women that exist in their orbit. So at worst, this can be some really dark allegations about how the men in this family kind of get down and use their power. Prince Andrew is definitely not alone in this. This is a network, right? And it seems like the aristocracy and the elites are also kind of facilitating a lot of this stuff, right? So he's gotten caught. And that means that other people are also at risk. So whether or not the court of law sees that he was wrong or not is the next big thing, because, you know, this would definitely jeopardize a lot of legal systems and governments, I think. If you're allowing people to get away with really terrible things just because they're rich and wealthy, things will start to kind of collapse because, you know, it's kind of like chaos, essentially. So, knowing this history, does it make more or less sense that Harry and Meghan got the fuck out of there, girl?
Yeah. It's looking really shady.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness, can you imagine Meghan stepping in and being like, I'm sorry, what?
What? What?
I love you, baby, but what?
What? No. Mm-mm.
Oh no.
It just makes more sense that, like, you know, you reach a certain point where you're like, nah, like, I can't handle this. Like, no.
Because if they were still there, it would probably be so much worse for them right now.
Mm-hmm.
There would be no end to the amount of hate and, you know, deflection and stuff poured on them because of this. So I'm happy that they're not there. And there's like, what, 6,000 miles between them and the UK. So if they say they did it, like, we're here in California, girl, with our babies. Don't know anything about that.
Mm-hmm. You kicked us out, so we have nothing to do with any of this.
Nothing to do with any of this.
And I think people are starting to see that a lot of what was going on, the accusations and allegations against Meghan and Harry, were distractions to a certain extent away from Andrew and his issues.
So vindication for the young couple, and lots of protection for them as well, because as we have seen, this family is not afraid of getting a little bit dirty. Right? Because remember that Kanga passed just 2.5 months after Princess Diana passed away, suspiciously in an accident.
And that's why we didn't hear about it a lot of times, because Diana was still in the news.
So 2 birds and 1 stone seems to have been what happened around that time. As terrible as that sounds, that's what it looks like. That's the very ugly truth of the matter.
And that's just making me want to look at Diana's chart.
I know. Maybe next time we'll do a deep dive on Diana's chart, because that's a pretty tough story to look at, but still a good life that she led. So I think it's worth the shot to study and to see what we can get out of it.
Yeah.
Anything else before we wrap up this scorching hot, terrible tea?
Yeah, no, like
this bitter tea.
This is the beginning of like many a season of troubles for the monarchy. Like, that's all I'm gonna say. Transit wise, it's not looking so hot. What can you do though? What can you do? You can't do anything.
No, this is not about judgment per se. This is really a look at how karma can play itself out, right? This is the reaping of what has been sown for many, many, many years in this family. This was not a one-off. This was not, oh, just a one time. And even if it wasn't a one-time thing, that's still awful. But this was repeated. This was over several years. This was with several family members, with several different friends. Like, this is a complete Scandal.
Mm-hmm.
Scandal with a capital S and bright red letters, girl. Flashing. Scandal.
It's just history and cycles over and over again. And so it's just like, I don't know, it's like it's Pluto and it's Saturn. You just see those over and over again. And those are like heavy hitter planets. You know what I mean? Like those aren't like, oh, whatever. Like those are like, oh, what have you been doing? And let's drag all of it up. Like,
So
and
too,
punishment.
Is that for people who might be watching or going through difficult times and you're going through transits or cycles, remember, like those cycles present opportunities for you to change, right? So when we had these, maybe when we had the nodal inverse, when we had the nodal return maybe 18 years ago, roughly, they had opportunity to stop in 2000, most likely. They had opportunity to stop 18 years before that. They had opportunities. Remember, because I don't know if I can find the clip, but there was, I think, a Johnny Carson clip from 1984 where he was joking about Andrew liking little girls.
Yep.
So
it was known.
It was known. That's almost 40 years of knowing that someone is doing this abusive behavior.
That's
and no
2
one's
nodal
stopping.
returns.
Yeah, 2 opportunities to stop. Didn't do it.
Yeah.
So now we're getting what we're getting right now.
Yeah.
So for you at home, who's like, ooh, should I stop? Stop.
Please.
Change your ways so that you are not caught up in this and you can stop hurting other people, because what people are forgetting is that this is causing complete trauma to so many communities and families, right? And this becomes another cycle that has to be undone and healed. So we want to stop this so that we can move on to bigger fish like climate change. Right. So thank you so much for tuning in. This was a lot of fun. We hope that you enjoy it. Comment below, tell us your thoughts, give us what you have seen in these charts that we might have missed. And yeah, let us know what you think and what you would like for us to cover next.
Yes, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yay. So have a great one, guys. Be safe out there. Wear your mask and wash your hands, and we hope to see you soon.